Well, welcome everyone, and I want to welcome OK Carter to our Culture Buzz segment, a familiar face to many of you who grew up reading his Arlington columns in the Star-Telegram. Is it fair to call you either our official or our unofficial historian?
I think unofficial historian. I don't believe there is an official historian for Arlington.
Well, you certainly can wear the title of unofficial very well,
Thank you very much.
Well, we appreciate you being here with us and to talk about the 100th anniversary of the Bankhead Highway, a very important component of Arlington's history. And why don't you start off for our viewers who might not be familiar with the Bankhead? Tell us, what is the Bankhead Highway?
Okay, here's the Bankhead Highway. By the way, just before we say that, there really are three transportation critical moments in Arlington history. One of them, of course, is DFW Airport. Sure. Another is the decision by Texas and Pacific to have a rail station here. And the third is the decision to move United States Highway 80, the Bankhead Highway, through the middle of Arlington. Now, back in 1916, there's your 100th birthday, the Congress decided to create basically a trails authority, and the main project was something called the Bankhead Highway, although we call it that now. And that Bankhead Highway would go from Washington, D.C. through 14 states, through the southern part of the United States, to end up in San Diego. And the old Division Street in Arlington is old US 80, the Bankhead Highway.
And all this happened well before we had an interstate highway
Now, keep in mind, there's no 20,
yeah.
There's no 30.
Right.
This is the main route through all of Dallas, through all of Fort Worth. This is the main route. If you want to take the southern trail through the United States, this is the road you take. You know, there's a northern route as well, but sometimes in winter, you just can't get by. So this is really the only passable year-round cross-country way to go across the country with an automobile.
The Bankhead is an interesting name. I understand this comes from a politician. Is that why
it comes from a series of politicians.
Okay.
There's an Alabama senator named John Hollis Bankhead, and then he has two sons, and one of them is William Bankhead, and then he has a son called William Bankhead. The second, by the way, William Bankhead is also the father of Tallulah Bankhead, the actress, but they were very interested in having this continental route. And so because they were in Congress so long, particularly William Bankhead was actually Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he was FDR's go-to guy for the New Deal. They were able to maintain consistent pressure to continue to build this highway all the way across the United States.
I'm envisioning back in the 1920 era or so when this was built.
They started constructing it in 1920.
Okay. There must have been a lot of clamoring for exactly where that route goes, much like we're doing right now with high-speed rail, right?
Huge competition. And by the way, a lot of these states didn't have state highway authorities, including Texas. And one of the requirements is to have a part of the Bankhead, you had to have a state highway authority. And so, yeah, everywhere you would go, you have competition. And every town you would go through, they would have their preferred route. And in Arlington, by the way, they actually had State Highway 1, which is what we call Abram now. And that's where most of the commerce in town was. And so naturally the city merchants wanted to come down Abram Street. The trouble was that route wove twice, just in Arlington, back and forth across the Texas and Pacific Railroad, and also the old interurban. So it was quite dangerous. And so the county commissioners wanted to build it just a little bit north of where Division Street is now. The city fathers didn't like it, and finally the county commissioners told them, well, you can put it anywhere you want if you want to pay for your section of Arlington, 5.85 miles. And so the city goes, okay, put it where it is now.
What's the impact, though? Because I would think this is a lifeblood to a small community.
Towns live, towns die,
right, based
on proximity to transportation access. And you've seen thousands of little towns that died up and died in Texas because they moved the interstate 2 miles away. Now for Arlington, you've got everybody who's going across the southern United States is going through the middle of town. And you also, so it's a tremendous commercial opportunity for restaurants, for service stations. In Arlington's case, it's even bigger than that because there for a while, in the late 20s, 30s, much of the 40s, we were sort of the Las Vegas before Las Vegas was. Right. It's sort of the forgotten part. You know, we had a horse racing track, we had a dog track, we had an illegal top of the hill casino. So you would go from Dallas to Fort Worth and you would come to Arlington, you know, for these amenities. And it's kind of a tradition that's been continued today with Six Flags and all this other stuff. But originally it's 20. And we also were famous for automobile dealerships. Right. At one point, all these dealerships that you see on 20 and 30 were right here, what's called the Arlington Auto Aisle on Division Street.
Wow. So did this have any impact on us being able to recruit GM to Arlington
Without 80, you don't have General Motors. Without 80, the Bankhead Highway, you don't have Great Southwest Industrial District. Now, eventually you have Highway 20, Highway 30 opened up, 20 is much later, 30 starts in 57 as the Texas Turnpike. And really, that opened up Arlington to become this sort of suburban, gigantic, fast-growing city, and also probably spells the end of Division Street and 80 through Arlington as a main commercial artery.
Yeah, I was wondering if the development of 30 and in particular also I-20, what impact that had on
it would be
the
tremendous.
Bankhead
You know,
Highway.
if you take when Division was at its prime, when US 80, the Bankhead Highway was going through the middle, from downtown Fort Worth to downtown Dallas is 82 stoplights.
Wow.
You know, it's a highway with stop, go, stop, go, stop, go, that sort of thing. So you build 31st, and probably you don't have Six Flags without that.
Right.
And then really, 20 doesn't really show up until really the late 70s and early 1980s. But that set off a huge boom. Those both ended up being rivers, really, of cash and commerce for Arlington. But you can kind of see one of the reasons that Division looks kind of old and maybe a little bit beat up is because it's really been there a very, very long time. By the way, it was originally 25 feet wide, like that,
Wow.
and had little amenities like you know, hand-carved rails on Johnson Creek, and even a tunnel under Division at the Masonic Home, so they could the Masons could walk underneath and catch the interurban.
Oh, wow.
So, of course, those kind of early amenities for US 80 have long since disappeared.
It's interesting to kind of look back and think about what Arlington would be without this, because the Ripple Parks Mall on I-20 is an example.
Absolutely.
And the Rangers moving here. Obviously, you mentioned General Motors moving here. All these things wouldn't have happened, and our growth that we had would likely not have happened as well, right?
You know, even as it was for a town of, at the time, for 7,800, at the time that General Motors came in, you probably wouldn't have had a General Motors. You know, the town probably wouldn't have been big enough for a 30 or a 20 without 80. So it's really a significant impact, not only here, but throughout Texas. I mean, you can see some things. 80 used to go through the middle of Mineral Wells, and it really, once 20 moved several miles south, it literally took Mineral Wells, and they're still recovering. It took them 3 decades to get over it. Because, so the economic impact, the cultural impact of something like a Bankhead Highway is just really immeasurable.
Immeasurable on our history, on our culture. This is a big deal for Arlington, and the right time for us to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the Bankhead Highway.
That is right.
Wonderful. Well, okay, Carter, thanks for being here
You're
with us
so
to answer
welcome.
our questions and to enlighten us on this history of Arlington. And thank you at home for joining us for this special edition of Culture Buzz. Be sure to join us again for another edition of Culture Buzz.